Charming, hardworking, and independent, he was the definition of a Texas cowboy.
He had every animal on the property that you could name. He was an adventurous person.
And when he met a beautiful young woman to match his vigor for life, it seemed like the sky was the limit for them both.
We had a great life together. Lifetime of great memories.
But on a dark spring night, someone got the drop on him.
There was one blow to the face and then a fall.
His cell phone was missing, his wallet was missing.
The investigation into his death leaves detectives with no shortage of suspects.
One resident had been awoken by shouting and door slamming.
He had a fresh injury to his face.
I didn't do anything. It's a thing someone to blame.
I don't know nothing that's going on.
You've got people telling very different stories. It raises red flags.
We get you in any lies, you're involved. You understand?
This whole thing was a setup.
But will the truth ever come to light?
He really loved women, and I knew it.
Did a pretty good job of breaking down the character of my brother.
It just confused the jury.
I couldn't believe it. I thought we had it in the bag.
We come from a Christian family, but I don't think you've seen the wrath of God yet.
April 13th, 2010. It's a sunny spring morning in Austin, Texas.
Austin is a very diverse city. It has a lot of music.
It's a college town, a lot of clubs and entertainment venues on 6th Street. So there's definitely a young kind of electricity and fun type of vibe through the town.
But the vibrant Metroplex also has its share of crime.
It was around 7 a.m. A man frantically called 911 because he had discovered what he believed was a deceased male.
Please come quick. I was a patrol officer at the time working in Southeast Austin and received a 911 call of a person down at an apartment complex. And so I and other officers responded.
When police arrive, the 911 caller, Caleb Tate, points officers towards the victim.
He's over here. I did locate a male lying face up on his back, kind of hanging over a small retaining wall, not in a position that you would normally see someone. He had trauma to his body and he was cold to the touch, which let me know that he had been there for a while.
The injuries to his face and the back of his head raised suspicion that there might be foul play involved.
Let's secure the scene, notify homicide.
All right. Yeah, dispatch, go ahead and start major crime star location.
When homicide detectives arrive on location, they begin trying to identify the victim.
The deceased did not have a wallet on him, so there was no photo ID for the police to identify him.
We were really at a loss. We didn't even know who the victim was.
Trauma to her injury.
Hey, I think I've got something here.
Near the body and the vegetation, they do find a set of keys.
If the keys belong to the victim, his car might still be parked at the complex.
There was approximately 12 to 15 vehicles in that area of the parking lot, and we just ran every single license plate.
When they ran one of the license plates, they found just what they were looking for.
That's him.
The driver looked just like their victim.
The description was of a Elmore Allen Jr. He was 49 years old.
His registered address was 15 miles away in Del Valley, Texas. How did he end up here?
Born and raised in a farming community 75 miles south of Austin, Elmore Allen Jr. had the spirit of a cowboy.
Everybody liked him and respected him. He was into nature, into horses, into good things in life. And he was an adventurous person. He was the life of the party, no matter what. And he participated a lot at church.
He loved singing gospel songs. He loved discussing the Bible.
Elmore had also built a lucrative career in trucking.
After graduating college, he moved up to Austin, Texas, and became an independent truck driver.
Elmore liked being his own boss and not having the constraints of having somebody look down over his shoulder. He was excellent at sales.
He was outgoing, had a very, very sweet personality, and had a smile that was you just love it. Almost to say you would kill for it. Women just loved Elmore. I said, yes, they did.
And Elmore loved women, too.
He was with a lot of women, and Elmore, when he had his first child, he was about 22.
By 1998, Elmore had fathered 7 more children.
Elmore's relationships with the mothers of his children never ended up working out, but he was still very involved in his kids' lives.
He was a dedicated father, and he really loved his children, and he spent a lot of time with each and every one of them.
But even after becoming a father, Elmore's wild spirit couldn't be tamed. Until his late 30s, when he met another single parent named Rochelle Smith.
Elmore and I met at the post office where I worked. He delivered freight there. We had a lot of likenesses. He was from the country, I was from the country. First date, we went to a bar. We struck it off. I mean, we hit it.
I haven't met many women like you that seem like they can keep up with me.
I guess you met your match.
Is that right?
It just went off from there. When I met Elmore, I had already had a daughter, and he cared for her like she was his own.
About 2 years into the relationship, Rochelle became pregnant, and that's where their son Cody came along.
Not long afterwards, the couple found their little slice of heaven.
We bought 5 acres in Del Valley, Texas.
He had every animal on the property that you could name.
We both loved animals. There was no not giving an animal a home. If there's a stray, we pick it up, we take it home.
He was very happy out there.
I felt that Elmore was my soulmate.
By 2010, the couple had been together for 11 years, and the spring of that year marked another special occasion in Elmore's life.
We was planning his 50th birthday. We was gonna have like a trail ride birthday party for him. Elmore and I had been talking, and we was gonna get back together and talk about it again in a couple of days.
However, Elmore would never get the chance to celebrate his golden birthday. On April 13th, 2010, Austin police have found him dead on the grounds of an apartment complex 15 miles from his country home.
It was clear to them that whatever had killed him wasn't just a fall.
The wound on the front of Mr. Allen's face was consistent with being hit with the butt of a gun.
We were, in fact, investigating a deceased person, a murder investigation.
But who would want to kill a loving father and hard-working rancher like Elmore Allen?
Was he meeting someone here, or was he brought here against his will?
In the spring of 2010, Elmore Allen Jr. was getting ready to celebrate his 50th birthday. The beloved father of 8 had a devoted partner of 11 years, a successful career, and a farm of his own just outside Austin, Texas.
Elmore and I, we had a great life together. It was awesome.
But on the morning of April 13th, Elmore is lying dead at an apartment complex 15 miles north of his rural ranch.
Detectives came to the conclusion that Elmore had been held at gunpoint, and that the wounds on his face may have been because he had been hit in the face with the end of the gun.
Mr. Allen had sustained an injury underneath his left eye and had struck the back of his head on a landscaping retaining wall.
It looked like he was murdered, and we felt like there was probably a robbery involved.
His pockets had been pulled out.
His cell phone was missing, his wallet was missing.
As detectives survey the crime scene, they wonder, what was Elmore doing at this apartment complex half an hour away from his country home?
Was he meeting someone here, or was he brought here against his will? Unfortunately, a search of his vehicle did not yield any useful evidence.
When the detectives pulled Elmore's sleeve back, they noticed a wristband.
We felt like that might indicate the location that he was at the previous night, just hours before he was found.
This was a yellow wristband that looked similar to something you'd find after going to a concert or a nightclub.
He's been somewhere.
But the wristband will only get detectives so far.
Even though we had the wristband without any sort of name on the wristband, there's really no place to start. There's hundreds of places in Austin that might issue that type of wristband.
This was going to be like finding a needle in a haystack.
Detectives hope the man who called 911, Caleb Tate, might have seen something else that could aid in their investigation.
Tell us a little bit more about what you witnessed.
Well, it started out just a typical day, you know.
He was leaving for work in the morning, walked to his car and discovered the victim.
Hey man, you okay? At first, I thought he was just passed out.
He thought the man might have been drunk, but it wasn't until he got closer that he realized this was much worse and ended up calling 911.
Hello? Just please get here quick.
Have you ever seen him around here before?
Not that I can think of.
Caleb tells the detectives that he has no idea who Mr. Allen is. He's never seen him before. He doesn't recognize him.
Thanks, Caleb. Take care.
Hitting a dead end with Caleb, detectives move on to speak with other residents of the apartment complex.
The police canvassed the area, trying to find out if any neighbors had heard anything or seen anything.
One resident mentioned that around 4 a.m. the night before, they had been awoken by what sounded like a man and a woman shouting and door slamming.
Well, it wasn't the first time they made a racket, so I didn't think too much about it.
That same resident did comment to the police that he's heard disturbances coming from that very same apartment below him previously.
The couple lived in Building 3, right next to where the decedent was found.
Detectives immediately head downstairs to knock on the couple's door, but they're already on their way out.
Hey, good morning.
They were met by Lucas Castro and Monica Guzman.
We're with the Austin Police Department.
We don't have time for this right now, I'm sorry.
While speaking to Mr. Castro and Ms. Guzman, it appears to the police that they're nervous about something.
Immediately, Lucas and Monica tried to leave the scene.
This is regarding a homicide that occurred outside your apartment last night.
A homicide?
But even more concerning is something the detectives notice about Lucas's appearance.
Lucas had a fresh injury to his face.
He appears to have blood on his shirt as well. This couple may know something that they're not saying.
Hours into the murder investigation of Elmore Allen Jr., witnesses have identified 2 residents allegedly involved in a disturbance on the night Elmore died.
Neighbors reported hearing an argument coming from your apartment. We found a body not far from this complex. Y'all know anything about that?
No, sir.
When they were asked about the scratch on Lucas's face, they both gave a very similar sounding answer.
He just got into a little tiff last night. Right, babe?
Yeah, nothing serious.
Lucas and Monica lived together. They were in a dating relationship and they were in some sort of a fight that did turn physical.
I work nights and I didn't get home until 3 a.m. We started arguing, he said something, and I got mad.
The couple admits their fight escalated.
They were raising their voice and slamming doors. Monica had gotten physical towards Lucas, scratching his face and pushing him into the TV stand.
Uh-huh. Was anyone else there?
No.
Their version of events was that this was a domestic dispute between two people. They didn't know Elmore. They didn't have anything to do with his death.
Mind if we take a look in your apartment?
Upon further investigation, detectives believe the couple is telling the truth.
They allowed us to search their apartment to look for any sort of evidence that might be related, and it was pretty obvious that their disturbance was probably not related to the victim.
With all leads at the apartment complex exhausted, detectives head to the address they found for Elmore.
Myself and Detective Fugit drove to that residence to talk to next of kin, who was his common-law wife at the time.
When they told me that they found Elmore dead, it was a shock, unbelievable. I didn't know what to say. What do you mean?
How could this happen?
The first thing that came to my mind was my son. How am I going to tell my son that his dad is not coming home tonight?
So sorry, ma'am. We're going to do everything we can to find out who did this.
When we talked to her, it was a hard conversation, obviously, because she had just been notified of his death.
I remember asking, where was he at? And they told me they found him at these apartments. Did I have any knowledge of him knowing anyone that lived there? And I didn't.
According to Rochelle, after 11 years together, she and Elmore hit a rough patch.
He really loved women, and I knew it. He messed around or cheated. He had a lot of other women that I would find out about, and that was very hurtful.
How long has this been going on?
The past few years.
I worked the day and he worked evenings. We were crossing paths, and it was like we were just kind of like growing apart.
But Rochelle tells detectives she still cared deeply for Elmore and hoped he would change.
I know that Elmore loved me, and I know he loved his family. And in a way, I thought it would all come back together.
When was the last time you saw Elmore?
Yesterday morning. When he didn't come home last night, I started blowing his phone up.
They asked me, did I know where Elmore would go out?
He sometimes would go to the club up in Austin.
Do you know which specific clubs?
I don't. I'm sorry.
I could not help them in telling them where Elmore was at. And I said the person that would probably know would be his best friend, Jesse.
His friend Jesse? I have his number.
Detectives are quick to follow up with Elmore's friend.
Hi, is this Jesse?
Unfortunately, we had to break the news to him that his friend was deceased. He was not aware of exactly where Mr. Allen was the night before, but he told us that Mr. Allen would visit the various strip clubs in the East Austin area, and he named 2 different specific strip clubs that he would visit. And so we went to go look at those places.
As detectives make the drive back up to Austin, news of Elmore's death spreads to the rest of his family.
The sheriff came to me and said, Miss Phillip, we found your brother this morning and he is deceased. And I couldn't hardly believe that. I had to ask her again, what did you say?
My sister Pam called me and she asked me, was I sitting down? And she said, Elmore's dead. And I said, what? What do you mean he's dead? I was just talking to him.
Back in Austin, detectives visit the first strip club on their list.
The first club that the detectives visited, they were able to speak with the staff. However, they said they didn't remember anyone by Elmore's description being there that night.
Investigators have much more luck at their next stop, a gentleman's club called Hot Bodies.
After talking to the manager, he identified the bracelet pretty quick and said, yes, that's absolutely our bracelet, and we used it last night.
Do you recognize this man?
Yeah, that's Elmore.
He immediately recognized him as a a normal customer that would come in, and corroborated that he had seen him there on Monday evening.
The manager says Elmore arrived at the club around 11 p.m.
Mr. Allen was flashing cash around the strip club and buying lots of drinks, was buying dances.
He was in really high spirits and sharing that he had just cashed a big check from work.
Apparently he was intoxicated.
Do you all have surveillance footage from last night we can look at?
Oh yeah, sure do. Want to take a look at it?
Absolutely.
Sure, let's do it.
Fortunately, Hot Bodies had surveillance footage of the parking lot area, and we were able to see Mr. Allen leave in his work truck, the same work truck that we found at the crime scene.
But from the looks of the footage, Elmore didn't leave alone.
There was a female that walked out behind him and got into the passenger seat, and they drove off together.
Whoever the woman was who he was leaving with may have something to do with the murder.
Detectives investigating the murder of Elmore Allen Jr. have just discovered surveillance footage showing their victim leaving an Austin area strip club with a young woman on the night he died.
Do you know who that woman is?
Oh, right there?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's Sin.
The manager was able to look at this footage and immediately identify the dancer as a stage name Sin.
Her real name is Jessica. She's one of our most popular dancers.
When they continued to look over the various footage from that evening, detectives also noticed some interesting footage from inside the club of the same dancer.
On the CCTV footage, detectives witnessed the woman taking a phone call before leaving the club with Elmore and getting into his truck.
Who was she calling?
Look.
After wrapping up their interview with the strip club manager, detectives run a background check on 20-year-old Jessica Krause Patterson, aka Sin.
What was curious is we were able to see that just a few months before, she was involved in some sort of a disturbance and got a ride home from one of our victim services counselors, and the location that she told that counselor to take her home to was the exact same location where our crime scene was, where Mr. Allen was found.
That's not the only shocking coincidence.
The apartment that she went to was Caleb's apartment. That's where she was staying.
Caleb Tate was the resident who called 911 and had given the tip about Elmore being found at the scene.
Have you ever seen him around here before?
Not that I can think of.
So when we saw the connection to Caleb Tate, I think it's pretty obvious that we needed to have a follow-up conversation with him.
Thanks for coming in, Caleb.
Of course.
We wanted to talk to you about Jessica Krause Patterson.
Caleb admits, yeah, he does know Jessica.
He was actually a former boyfriend as well as a former roommate.
We know Jessica was with the man who was killed outside your apartment the other night. What? Do you want to tell us anything about that?
Detectives feel like there's no way that this is just a coincidence.
But Caleb insists that it is.
I don't know anything about that, I swear.
When Caleb realized that he could potentially be involved, as a suspect in a murder investigation, he was pretty cooperative with us. He told us Jessica did live with him a few months prior.
So she's not staying with you anymore?
No. She's kicking it with another guy now, JT Banks.
One of the things that he told us is that he had overheard a conversation between Jessica and her boyfriend JT where they planned on robbing somebody.
And so this is an obvious red flag to detectives.
It sounded very, very similar to what we might be investigating.
The fact that Caleb is Jessica's only known tie to the location where Elmore was killed still gives detectives pause, but they decide to let him go for the time being.
Thanks, Caleb. We'll be in touch. You're free to go.
Police found nothing else to connect him to Elmore's death. So at this point, they shifted their focus to Jessica and JT.
So we did bring Jessica to the police department consensually, and JT was with her when we found her, and he came along. So we split up. I interviewed Jessica, and Detective Fugit interviewed JT.
Jessica tells Detective Greenwald she hasn't been working at Hot Body Strip Club for long.
I was starting. I got out of school for a little bit and thought that I was gonna get rich. You know, dancing or something.
But Detective Greenwald keeps the small talk short.
Okay. You know why you're here?
No.
You have no idea?
No.
If you had to guess, what would you think? Here's the thing is, investigating a pretty serious incident, okay? We're investigating the death that occurred on Bluff Springs a couple nights ago.
Okay.
This is your opportunity to tell me everything that happened, to be cooperative with this investigation.
The first time that we interviewed Jessica, she did explain to us that when Hot Bodies closed that night, she got a ride from one of her customers, and she described Mr. Elmore Allen perfectly, described his truck, and said that she got into the passenger side of the truck so that he could give her a ride home.
He said he was going the same way as me after I say that.
But a few miles down the road, Jessica claims Elmore started coming on to her.
He tried to feel me up. He had tried to feel me up earlier too, but I told him to stop.
She said that she got out of the car near a McDonald's because Mr. Allen was making sexual advancements that she wasn't comfortable with.
According to Jessica, JT and his brother Larry picked her up in Larry's white sedan.
Where'd y'all go after that?
Straight home.
She said that they went back to the home that JT shared with his brother Larry and where Jessica had also been staying.
She sticks to that story, and that she had no idea what had happened to Mr. Allen.
Over in the other interrogation room, JT shares a similar story, but with one key difference.
Where'd you pick her up from? Right there, little street right there, in front of Hot Bodies.
He did not mention anything about her having been in a customer's car or going to a McDonald's to pick her up.
Jessica tell you who she left with Monday night? No. She left with me. Yeah, she left with that guy right there.
When you're faced with that situation where you've got people telling very different stories, it raises red flags, right?
This tells a seasoned detective that they are talking to the right people.
It was pretty obvious they were hiding intimate details of what happened that night.
In April of 2010, Austin police are interviewing 20-year-old Jessica Krause Patterson and her 23-year-old boyfriend JT Banks about the night Elmore Allen Jr. was killed in a suspected robbery.
He was trying to like feel on me and stuff, you know, so I had him pull over and I called JT and JT came and got me.
But the couple's stories aren't matching up.
She got that guy's vehicle and she left with that guy right there. For what? Well, you tell me. You said you went and picked her up at 2.
JT continued to insist that Jessica left work with him that night and not Elmore. And he said that he had no knowledge of what happened to Elmore later that night.
I don't know nothing that's going on.
That's when detectives decide to try a new tactic with both suspects.
If they did kill Elmore, maybe they didn't mean to.
We talked to them about the difference between a murder where somebody's intentionally trying to kill somebody and a murder where they may have just been trying to rob somebody and somebody accidentally died.
Did you want for him to die?
Oh my God, no, what are you talking about?
Unfortunately, detectives are still getting nowhere with Jessica and JT.
Jessica got really nervous at this point and got emotional, and then she terminated the interview.
You said this was voluntary, right?
It's completely voluntary.
So I can leave?
If you want to.
Okay, I'd like to go.
JT follows her lead, leaving detectives with no choice but to let them walk.
We didn't have enough probable cause to issue warrants for their arrest.
However, police are able to confiscate the couple's cell phones. And in reviewing the contents of the phones, investigators make some eye-opening discoveries.
How the events played out became crystal clear once we got those digital pieces of evidence back and compared them with the surveillance video.
The young lady was texting her boyfriend, letting him know that Elmore has money on him.
They talk about, "Are you here yet? Hurry up." They refer to Mr. Allen.
On the surveillance video, before she left the club with Elmore, you could see that Jessica made a call.
We find out that through the phone records that she's actually calling JT, obviously preparing JT to go to the apartment complex and lie in wait for them to arrive.
But that's not the only evidence detectives find in Jessica's cell phone data.
The next morning, Jessica's taking a picture of at least $700 or so and then bragging to her friends about how much money she made the previous night.
Detectives followed up with the manager at Hot Bodies, and he said that there was no way that she could have made that type of money working at the club, especially on a Monday night.
At that point in time, we felt like we had enough probable cause to arrest Jessica.
On April 30th, detectives take Jessica back into custody and confront her with everything they've learned.
We got the phone records back. It's all fitting together like a nice, neat puzzle.
But even in the face of the evidence, Jessica continues to deny and deflect.
Whose idea was it?
There was no idea. I didn't do anything.
Well, who did? If it wasn't
Nobody did.
She basically reiterated the first story that she told us.
Doesn't need someone to blame. I work hard for my money. I work my ass off when I work.
She denied having arrived there. She denied having been there that night and claimed that they didn't rob anybody.
You have to tell me how it really went down. Are you willing to tell me?
Unfortunately for detectives, Jessica completely shuts down.
We were really unable to get any additional information from her.
But before circling back around to JT, detectives turn their attention to his younger brother, Larry.
We know from talking to JT and Jessica that he was the one who drove JT over to pick up Jessica the night of the murder.
Police told him this is his chance to come clean, and that if he doesn't want to be charged with an accessory to murder, he needs to come forward with absolutely everything that he knows.
You know the night that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
This time, detectives are in luck.
He was willing to exchange information about what happened.
I'm gonna be straight up real with you. I'm not trying to get in trouble, but man.
You're stuck in a bad place.
Yeah.
Texas detectives investigating the tragic death of 49-year-old Elmore Allen Jr. believe local dancer Jessica Krause Patterson and her boyfriend JT Banks are behind the crime.
Police had surveillance footage and phone records from that night to support their theory.
And now, they're gathering an eyewitness account from JT's brother, Larry.
I'm gonna be straight up real with you. I'm not trying to get in trouble, but man.
You're stuck in a bad place.
Yeah.
JT told police that his brother Larry drove him over to the strip club to pick up Jessica at about 2 a.m. But Larry denied that version of events.
He said he didn't even know where Hot Bodies was and did not drive JT to go pick up Jessica that night.
According to Larry, JT did ask him for a ride, but not to the strip club.
So my brother was like, well, take me over here to these apartments. I'm like, why? Because supposedly Jessica left or something.
They went to Jessica's old apartment complex, which is exactly where the crime scene was. He described driving there with JT. He said that he parked and JT got out of the car.
And then he was like, I'll be right back. So I parked the car and he went to go get Jessica. And in about 3-4 minutes, I get 5 tops. They came back.
According to Larry, nothing seemed off at first.
She was happy, he was happy.
But JT handed something to Jessica. It was something in a baggie.
I asked her what it was. She's like, nah, that is just trash.
On the car ride home, JT asked Larry to pull over.
So he opened this dumpster and threw something in the trash. Then after that, we just went to the aisle.
We feel like that was probably Mr. Allen's cell phone and his wallet after they had removed the cash.
Investigators feel like they can trust what Larry is telling them.
Catch you in any lies, you're involved. You understand?
We really didn't feel like he was a planner or profited from this particular robbery and murder, and we felt like he was being used by JT in the whole situation as just somebody to give them a ride.
After speaking with Larry, police charged JT Banks and Jessica Krause Patterson with first-degree felony murder.
We feel like they knowingly and intentionally committed a violent crime in that they robbed Elmore Allen, they struck him in the face, and because of their actions during that felony, he died.
On June 7th, 2011, a little more than a year after Elmore's death, the defendant's trial gets underway.
Jessica and JT are actually tried together.
Prosecutors argue that Jessica set her eyes on Elmore as a target the moment he walked into the club. Elmore was intoxicated and was flashing his cash.
He had got paid shortly before that, and he had a lot of money on him.
That money obviously drew the attention of Mrs. Krause Patterson.
Do you think you could give me a ride home?
Yeah. Let's get out of here.
Okay, let me go get changed.
You do that.
This whole thing was a setup.
Prosecutors believe that Jessica led Elmore to drive to the apartment complex and that secretly she was coordinating with JT to rob him.
And when they got to the complex, JT stepped forward with a gun.
Empty your pockets now! Roll now! Roll!
He forced Elmore to give over his money, even though he cooperated. JT still struck him with a gun and pistol whipped him. The blow to the face caused Elmore to lose balance, and he had a hard landing.
And it did, in fact, cause his death.
In a shocking move, JT and Jessica's attorneys admit that they killed Elmore, but they claim the couple acted in self-defense.
The defense raised the question of a potential sexual assault that was happening, and that maybe JT, came to her aid and rescue, but it really didn't explain the text messages where they planned and coordinated the joint arrival at the apartment complex. I think it just confused the jury.
The defense attorneys did a pretty good job of breaking down the character of my brother, Elmore, because of his lifestyle, with a lot of women. I was disappointed.
The defense team's efforts are enough to thwart the prosecution's case.
Ultimately, the jury in that case just couldn't reach a verdict, and they hung, and a mistrial was declared.
The disappointment was there when they was not convicted. Immediately, we wanted to do a retrial.
I was just totally distraught. I couldn't believe it. I thought we had it in the bag.
Prosecutors remain determined to achieve justice for Elmore and his family. So to bolster their case against JT, they decide to make Jessica an offer.
In exchange for her testimony and filling in the gaps about everything that happened, she would receive a 5-year sentence in prison for her involvement.
Now, Jessica decides her freedom is more important than her relationship with her boyfriend.
She took the deal and agreed to testify against JT.
I was okay with the plea deal that they gave Jessica. For her to tell what really happened was a relief. It almost brought closure.
When JT's retrial begins, Jessica is the prosecution's star witness.
She acknowledged it. She acknowledged what she had did.
Jessica finally admitted, yes, we lured Elmore to those apartments, yes, we robbed him, and yes, we killed him.
Thanks to Jessica's testimony, the prosecution finally gets a win in their case against JT.
This method proved to be successful for the prosecution. And this go around, they were able to get a guilty verdict for JT and a sentence of 23 years.
I was very happy with that, and my family was happy with that.
During the impact statement, the attorney might have said something at the point that JT did feel bad about what he said, but I was able to give my part of the impact statement. And I let him know that, hey, you didn't only take my brother, but you took a father, a grandfather. And I told him, I said, you know, we forgive you because we come from a Christian family, but I don't think you've seen the wrath of God yet.
While Elmore's family has found it in their hearts to forgive, they'll never forget the man that brought so much joy to their lives.
There's not a day that we don't think about him and miss him.
My baby brother Elmore Allen Jr., Nuki Boy, was a wonderful man.
My happiest times were with Elmore and the things that we did. He did leave good memories, a lifetime of great memories.
The envelope arrived at the forensic laboratory on a rainy Thursday morning without return address, without fingerprints, without explanation. Just a faded evidence tag stapled to the corner and 6 words scribbled across the front in black marker. You missed him the first time. Nobody inside the building understood the significance immediately because cold case units received strange mail constantly. Fake confessions. Conspiracy letters. Psychics claiming visions buried in dreams. But veteran forensic analyst Dana Mercer felt uneasy the moment she opened the package and found the tiny plastic evidence tube wrapped carefully in newspaper dated October 1974. Inside the tube rested a single strand of blonde hair, barely visible, fragile, almost meaningless. Except attached beneath, it was another note. From a girl in room 12. Dana stopped breathing for a second because every detective in the state knew exactly what room 12 meant. The Blackridge Motel murders, one of the oldest unsolved serial killer cases in American history. 5 women butchered across 3 counties between 1971 and 1974. 1 survivor, 1 witness. 1 little girl found alive hiding beneath a motel bed while her mother bled to death beside the bathroom sink. That child, 7-year-old Emily Voss, spent 50 years haunted by a face she could never fully describe and a voice investigators could never trace. Room 12 became infamous nationwide because it was the place the killer finally made a mistake. At least that was what detectives believed for half a century. But they never found him until the envelope appeared. By noon, retired investigators who once worked the original Blackridge Task Force began arriving at the Forensic Center after emergency calls from state authorities. Gray-haired men carrying decades of frustration in their eyes stared silently at the evidence tube, while rain hammered against laboratory windows outside. Some looked angry, others looked terrified, because if the hair inside that tube truly came from room 12, it meant somebody possessed evidence connected directly to the killings all along and kept it hidden for 50 years. The Blackridge murders never faded from public memory completely. They poisoned entire communities across the Midwest during the early 70s. Women vanished from gas stations, roadside diners, cheap motels along forgotten highways stretching through isolated towns where everyone locked doors before sunset once the headlines began spreading. Interstate killer still hunting. Blonde hitchhiker found slain near county line. Police fear traveling predator. Victims shared disturbing similarities. Young women, usually alone, usually passing through town temporarily. The killer attacked with terrifying control. Restraints, staged crime scenes, no fingerprints. No witnesses except one child too traumatized to identify him clearly. Investigators called him the highway ghost because he moved across jurisdictions faster than law. Enforcement could coordinate during an era before digital databases connected counties efficiently. By the time detectives linked the murders officially, the trail had already gone cold. Then came Blackridge Motel in October 1974. Emily Voss and her mother stopped there during a storm while driving toward Illinois after visiting relatives. Sometime after midnight, someone entered room 12. Emily survived only because she crawled beneath the bed after hearing screaming. Her mother did not. Detectives found the child nearly catatonic hours later, still clutching a broken toy rabbit soaked in blood. Emily repeated the same sentence for weeks afterward. The man smelled like smoke. That was all investigators ever got. No sketch, no license plate, no name. The case collapsed slowly over the years beneath dead leads and disappearing evidence until eventually Blackridge became another unsolved horror buried inside dusty archives. But now the envelope threatened to rip the entire nightmare open again. Forensic analysts rushed the hair sample into advanced DNA sequencing immediately while detectives searched desperately for whoever mailed the package. Security cameras near the laboratory revealed nothing useful, only a hooded figure dropping the envelope into an overnight mailbox shortly before dawn. No face visible, no vehicle identifiable. It's something about the precision of the delivery unsettled investigators immediately. Whoever sent the evidence understood exactly what room 12 meant. And they knew modern forensic technology could finally extract answers impossible during the 70s. 3 days later, the DNA results arrived. The laboratory went silent after Dana Mercer opened the report because the profile extracted from the hair matched biological evidence recovered from 3 separate Blackridge murder scenes, preserved decades earlier in refrigerated storage. The same unknown male profile connected all the killings officially for the first time. Detectives reportedly stared at one another speechless because after 50 years the highway ghost suddenly became scientifically real. Not rumor, not theory, a living biological identity waiting somewhere inside genealogical databases. State authorities launched emergency forensic genealogy procedures within hours. News leaked almost immediately. Tiny DNA sample may solve infamous cold case murders. Investigators reopened Blackridge serial killer investigation. National media exploded. Surviving relatives of victims flooded hotlines, demanding updates, while retired detectives appeared on television, struggling emotionally during interviews. But nobody reacted more intensely than Emily Voss herself. Now, 57 years old, Emily lived quietly in Oregon under a different surname after decades, avoiding public attention connected to the murders. When investigators contacted her about the new DNA evidence, witnesses said she stopped speaking entirely for several seconds before whispering one question. Did they finally find the smoking man? Detectives working the genealogy angle moved carefully because degraded DNA from historical cases often produce dead ends despite technological advances. But this time the profile generated a partial familial match almost immediately through public ancestry databases. A second cousin, then another. Investigators built family trees stretching backward through rural towns scattered across Kansas and Missouri. One branch caught attention quickly, the Rayner family. Several male relatives lived near highways connected geographically to multiple Blackridge murder sites during the early 70s. Most were dead now. Farmers, mechanics, truck drivers, ordinary men buried beneath ordinary histories. Except one, Daniel Rayner, former traveling salesman, military veteran, heavy smoker according to relatives. Arrested repeatedly during the 60s for assault charges against women, but never convicted. Dead since 1998 after liver failure in a veterans hospital outside Tulsa. Detectives reviewing Daniel Rayner's archived records noticed something chilling immediately. During 1974, Rayner worked routes passing directly through Blackridge County every month. Worse still, motel receipts recovered from storage placed him less than 8 miles from the Blackridge Motel on the night Emily Voss's mother died. The task force erupted with cautious excitement. After 50 years, they finally had a name. But experienced investigators remained uneasy. Because serial killers do not vanish in a thin air after 5 murders. And Daniel Rayner's documented movements between 1975 and 1990 aligned suspiciously with several unsolved homicides across neighboring states, sharing similarities to Blackridge victims. The possibility terrified everyone involved. What if the highway ghost never stopped killing? Detectives reopened dozens of archive cases immediately while forensic analysts compared preserved evidence against Rayner's DNA profile. Matches began appearing faster than anyone expected. Nebraska, Iowa, Arkansas. Young women found near highways, motels, truck stops. Some cases forgotten completely after decades. Others still active mysteries, tormenting families who never received answers. By the second week of investigation, authorities privately suspected Daniel Rayner may rank among the most prolific unidentified serial killers in regional history. Then another envelope arrived. Same handwriting, same black marker, no fingerprints. Inside sat a Polaroid photograph investigators had never seen before. Grainy, yellowed with age. The image showed a smiling young woman standing outside a roadside diner beneath a flickering neon. Signed sometime during the 70s. Detectives identified her within hours. Linda Carver, missing since August 1973. Never found. But scribbled across the bottom of the photograph were 7 words that froze the entire task force. You still don't know about the basement. The room inside Blackridge headquarters reportedly fell completely silent after detectives read the sentence aloud, because nowhere in public records did investigators ever mention a basement connected to Daniel Rayner. Yet buried deep inside archived evidence logs from 1975 sat one overlooked detail almost forgotten by everyone still alive. During an early search warrant, detectives briefly examined Rayner's rural farmhouse outside Millhaven before lacking probable cause to continue. One officer documented hearing strange noises beneath the house, but no basement entrance was located during the search. The note disappeared inside filing cabinets for decades. Now somebody clearly wanted investigators to dig there again. State police moved before sunrise. Helicopters circled over frozen farmland while television crews gathered along muddy county roads, broadcasting live updates nationwide. Daniel Rayner's old farmhouse still stood abandoned beneath collapsing trees nearly 30 years. After his death, windows shattered, paint peeled away by storms and time. But as forensic teams entered the structure with ground-penetrating radar equipment, veteran detectives felt something darker than anticipation crawling through the house itself. Because after 50 years chasing the highway ghost, they were finally walking directly into whatever he left behind. The farmhouse smelled like wet wood mold, and something older trapped beneath the floorboards for decades. The kind of smell investigators never forget because it lingers long after crime scenes close and bodies disappear into evidence bags. State police moved carefully through the collapsing structure while television helicopters thundered overhead outside, broadcasting every second live across the country. Retired detectives who worked the original Blackridge Task Force stood silently near the doorway, watching younger investigators sweep rooms Daniel Rayner once walked through 50 years earlier. Some looked overwhelmed. Others looked furious, because they all understood the same terrible possibility. The highway ghost may have hidden evidence beneath their feet the entire time, while investigators spent half a century searching highways, motels, forests, and rivers across 4 states. Ground-penetrating radar quickly identified structural anomalies beneath the kitchen floor. Sheriff Tom Avery ordered immediate excavation despite the unstable condition of the building. Workers tore apart warped linoleum and rotted timber while forensic photographers documented every Then one officer struck concrete beneath the dirt crawl space, a hidden slab, too deliberate to ignore. The room reportedly went silent except for cameras clicking and rain hammering against the roof. Overhead, investigators pried upward slowly until a rusted metal ring emerged from beneath packed earth. A hatch, old, sealed from the outside. Several detectives later admitted they already knew before opening it that whatever waited underneath would change the case forever. When the hatch finally groaned open, a wave of cold air escaped from darkness below, carrying a smell so foul multiple officers stepped back, instantly covering their faces. One investigator whispered, "Jesus Christ," before anyone even descended the ladder. Flashlights cut through blackness, revealing concrete walls beneath the farmhouse. Not a simple cellar. A constructed underground room stretching farther than expected beneath the property. Shelving units lined one wall. Rusted chains bolted into concrete lined another. And hanging from ceiling pipes near the rear of the chamber, investigators found dozens of yellowed newspaper clippings about missing women dating back to the late 60s. Some articles involved known Blackridge victims. Others described disappearances never officially connected to the highway ghost. Detectives reportedly froze while reading the headlines because Daniel Raynor had collected them. Obsessively. Trophy walls, memorials to hunting grounds spanning decades. But the true horror waited deeper inside. Near the rear corner of the underground chamber, forensic teams uncovered a locked storage compartment hidden behind shelving units. Officers forced the rusted door open, expecting documents or photographs. Instead, they found women's belongings stacked carefully inside cardboard boxes. Shoes, jewelry, handbags, driver's licenses, family photographs, some tagged with names matching confirmed victims, others belonging to women never identified publicly. Then one detective opened a smaller metal case near the back and discovered something that made hardened investigators physically stagger backward. Human teeth, dozens of them, cataloged carefully inside labeled envelopes. By sunset, federal authorities sealed the property entirely while forensic anthropologists flooded the scene. News networks interrupted programming nationwide with emergency coverage. Hidden chamber discovered beneath serial killer suspect's farmhouse. Investigators fear more victims. Families of missing women began arriving outside police barricades, clutching photographs and demanding answers through tears. The Blackridge investigation exploded from cold case curiosity into one of the most disturbing serial murder discoveries in modern forensic history. Yet amid the chaos, detectives focused obsessively on one question: who kept sending the envelopes? Because whoever mailed the DNA sample and photograph clearly knew about the hidden basement long before authorities reopened the property. That meant at least one person alive today possessed intimate knowledge of Daniel Raynor's crimes. Investigators reviewed every surviving connection to Raynor's life, searching for relatives, former co-workers, lovers, cellmates, anyone who may have discovered evidence decades earlier. One name surfaced repeatedly during interviews with older Millhaven residents: Samuel Pike, Raynor's closest friend during the 70s, former mechanic, heavy drinker, died in 2002 after a suspicious cabin fire investigators never fully explained. According to locals, Pike and Raynor spent years hunting together across isolated farmland outside town. Several witnesses remembered women arguing with Pike publicly about dangerous secrets shortly before he disappeared from social circles entirely during the late 80s. Detectives reopened Pike's archived records immediately. Buried within old sheriff department reports, investigators discovered something deeply unsettling. In 1981, Samuel Pike's wife Margaret filed a domestic disturbance complaint claiming her husband woke screaming nightly about girls under the house. The report was dismissed after Margaret refused further cooperation. She vanished from town less than 6 months later. No forwarding address, No missing persons report. Detectives tracking surviving relatives finally located Margaret Pike living under another surname in Arizona at age 78. When investigators contacted her about Daniel Rayner, witnesses said the elderly woman began shaking so violently she dropped the phone. Federal agents flew west immediately. Margaret initially refused speaking on record, but after investigators showed her photographs recovered from the basement beneath Rayner's farmhouse, she reportedly broke down completely. Through tears, she admitted Samuel Pike confessed horrifying things during drunken episodes. Throughout the 70s, according to Margaret, Pike helped Rayner clean up messes after women disappeared near highway routes. He described hidden rooms beneath the farmhouse, restraints, screaming, women kept alive for days. Margaret claimed she wanted to contact police repeatedly, but feared Rayner because Samuel insisted. Danny knew cops everywhere. Then Margaret revealed something even worse. Daniel Rayner was not working alone all those years. The interview room reportedly froze again. Margaret described another man visiting the farmhouse regularly during the murders. Older, educated, smoked constantly, drove expensive cars despite the rural area. She never learned his real name because Samuel called him only Doctor. Detectives immediately revisited archived Blackridge evidence, searching for overlooked connections to medical professionals. One pattern emerged disturbingly fast. Several victims were found with precise incision wounds, suggesting anatomical knowledge. Another case involved sedatives never traced successfully during the 70s investigation. Suddenly, the possibility of a second offender changed everything. The highway ghost might never have been a lone predator at all. Meanwhile, forensic excavation beneath the farmhouse produced more horrifying discoveries daily. Cadaver dogs alerted repeatedly near the foundation and surrounding fields. By the end of the week, investigators uncovered partial remains belonging to at least 4 women, buried in shallow graves around the property. Some deaths predated the official Blackridge murders by years. Others occurred afterward, proving Daniel Rayner continued killing long after authorities believed the spree ended. But one discovery shattered investigators emotionally more than anything else recovered so far. Hidden inside a sealed crawl space beneath the basement floor, forensic teams discovered dozens of audio tapes preserved inside waterproof containers. Labels written carefully across each cassette contained only women's first names and dates. Detectives hesitated before listening. Then they heard the voices. Victims speaking, crying, pleading. Some recordings captured terrified conversations between women in an unidentified male voice. Investigators believed belonged to Rayner. But another voice appeared repeatedly too. Calm, older, clinical. The same man Margaret Pike described as Doctor. The tapes horrified everyone involved because the second voice sounded detached, fascinated, almost analytical, while discussing victims like experimental subjects rather than human beings. One recording ended abruptly after a young woman begged repeatedly to see her daughter again. Investigators later identified the victim as Linda Carver, the woman from the Polaroid mailed anonymously to the task force days earlier. Then came the sentence that changed the investigation entirely. Near the end of one damaged tape, Linda whispered something barely audible through crying. The doctor said they're taking me to Blackridge next. Detectives replayed the audio repeatedly inside silent laboratories because until that moment they assumed the Blackridge Motel murder represented a random stop along Rayner's hunting routes. But Linda's statement suggested something deliberate, planned. Blackridge may have been chosen intentionally for reasons investigators still didn't understand. Then forensic genealogy analysts uncovered another bombshell hidden inside archived DNA evidence. Biological material recovered from one unidentified crime scene in Nebraska did not match Daniel Rayner completely. Instead, it belonged to a close relative, brother, cousin, or son. The room inside Task Force headquarters reportedly fell silent again because Daniel Rayner officially had no children, no surviving siblings either. Yet scientifically, another male connected biologically to the killings existed somewhere, alive or dead. And suddenly detectives realized the highway ghost investigation was no longer about identifying a forgotten serial killer after 50 years. It was about uncovering an entire buried network of secrets stretching across generations. Then another envelope arrived at the forensic laboratory. Same handwriting, same black marker, this time containing only a motel room, key attached to a stained evidence tag. Room 12, Blackridge Motel. Alongside it sat a final message written shakily across folded paper. He kept one victim alive longer than the others. The motel key triggered panic inside the Blackridge Task Force because Room 12 no longer existed. The Blackridge Motel burned down in 1989 after an electrical fire tore through the abandoned structure during a thunderstorm, leaving behind only charred foundations and collapsed brick walls swallowed slowly by weeds along Highway 16. Yet the key mailed anonymously to the laboratory was authentic. Same brass numbering, same faded blue plastic tag, described in original evidence photographs from 1974. Detectives immediately understood the implication. Whoever kept sending envelopes possessed direct access to evidence never released publicly and possibly removed from police custody decades earlier. But the message attached to the key disturbed investigators even more. He kept one victim alive longer than the others. Federal analysts reviewing recovered audio tapes from Rayner's basement already suspected several. Women survived captivity for extended periods before death. But the wording suggested something different this time. Singular, intentional. One victim separated from the rest. One woman who mattered differently to Daniel Rayner and the unidentified man called Dr. Sheriff Tom Avery ordered complete review of every missing persons case remotely connected to Blackridge between 1968 and 1980. Investigators flooded archives, searching for women who vanished but never appeared among identified remains recovered from the farmhouse property. By the third day, one name surfaced repeatedly in interviews, evidence files, and forgotten newspaper articles. Rachel Devereaux, 24 years old, nursing student from Wichita, vanished in June 1972 while driving toward Missouri for a summer internship. Her car appeared abandoned outside a truck stop 40 miles from Blackridge. But Rachel herself disappeared completely. No body, no confirmed sightings, no forensic evidence linking her officially to the highway ghost killings. Yet multiple details now looked deeply suspicious. Rachel studied trauma medicine and pharmacology during nursing school. Several classmates remembered her dating an older physician briefly before disappearing. And buried inside archived witness statements from 1972, investigators discovered one overlooked detail almost erased by time. A waitress near the truck stop reported seeing Rachel arguing with two men hours before vanishing. One smelled heavily of cigarette smoke. The other wore a doctor's coat despite summer heat. Detectives reopened Rachel's case immediately while forensic teams compared preserved evidence from her abandoned vehicle against DNA recovered beneath Daniel Rayner's farmhouse. Then the match came back positive. Hair fibers recovered from the trunk belonged to Rachel Devereaux. The laboratory reportedly fell silent again because for the first time investigators possessed direct scientific proof linking the missing nursing student to the highway ghost network. But if Rachel entered Rayner's orbit in 1972, why did nobody ever find her remains among other victims? That question became the obsession consuming the task force. Meanwhile, excavation beneath the farmhouse expanded deeper underground after structural engineers discovered hidden corridors extending beyond the main chamber. Detectives forced through rotted walls and collapsed storage areas until eventually reaching another concealed room untouched for decades. Unlike the first basement chamber, this space appeared almost domestic. A mattress, sink, shelving units, medical equipment covered in dust. And near one wall, investigators discovered tally marks scratched into concrete, thousands of them. Someone had lived there for a long time. Then forensic specialists uncovered strands of long dark hair trapped inside rusted bed springs. DNA analysis later confirmed the impossible. Rachel Devereaux survived inside the hidden room for at least several months after disappearing. The revelation detonated across national media instantly. Serial killer held woman captive underground. Police fear missing nurse suffered months of abuse. Survivors' families gathered outside the farmhouse daily, while investigators carried boxes of evidence through floodlights beneath constant rain. But inside task force headquarters, something darker was unfolding. Because recovered audio tapes from the basement began revealing disturbing changes in the unidentified doctor's behavior over time. Early recordings portrayed him detached, clinical, fascinated by control and fear. But later tapes involving Rachel Devereaux sounded different. Personal, obsessive. Investigators heard the doctor speaking softly with Rachel for hours about medicine, religion, childhood memories, even classical music. At one point, Rachel asked why he kept visiting her instead of letting her die. The doctor answered quietly, "Because you still speak to me like I'm human." Detectives listening through headphones reportedly struggled emotionally because the interaction sounded horrifyingly intimate. Rachel wasn't merely a captive. She became psychologically important to one of the men imprisoning her. Then analysts uncovered another disturbing detail hidden beneath degraded audio frequencies. Rachel appeared to be gathering information intentionally during conversations, asking names, locations, dates, details about previous victims. One tape ended with Rachel whispering, "Someone will hear this eventually." The task force suddenly realized something chilling. Rachel Devereaux may have been documenting the killers from inside captivity years before. Investigators ever knew she existed. Then came the breakthrough nobody expected. During forensic restoration of heavily damaged cassette tapes recovered from Rayner's basement, audio specialists isolated a background sound repeated consistently during recordings involving Rachel. Church bells, distinctive, unusual rhythm. Investigators cross-referenced historical bell recordings from dozens of towns throughout Kansas and Missouri until one match surfaced precisely. St. Luke's Medical Chapel outside Brennan County, a private religious treatment facility operating during the 70s under supervision of renowned psychiatrist Dr. Adrian Vale. The room inside headquarters reportedly went completely silent when investigators pulled Vale's photograph from archived medical directories because multiple surviving witnesses independently identified him instantly as resembling the older man Margaret Pike called Dr. Adrian Vale died officially in 1991 after a boating accident on Lake Mercer. Respected physician, public mental health advocate, consultant for state correctional institutions, celebrated philanthropist. Yet beneath the polished reputation, investigators quickly uncovered disturbing allegations buried. For decades, former patients accused Vale repeatedly of unethical treatments involving isolation therapy, heavy sedation, and psychological conditioning experiments during the late 60s. Complaints vanished mysteriously without disciplinary action. Worse still, financial records connected Vale indirectly to motel properties, medical supply shipments, and charities operating near multiple highway ghost murder locations. Suddenly, the investigation exploded beyond Daniel Rayner entirely. The task force now believed Dr. Adrian Vale may have orchestrated portions of the killings while using Rainer as transportation, muscle, and disposal support. But the greatest shock arrived hours later through DNA analysis. Biological traces recovered from Rachel Devereaux's hidden room beneath the farmhouse included evidence of pregnancy. Detectives reportedly stared speechless at laboratory reports because Rachel disappeared in 1972 and remained captive underground for months, possibly longer, which meant the unidentified relative linked genetically to crime scene evidence in Nebraska might not be Daniel Rainer's son at all. It could belong to Rachel's child, a child potentially born inside captivity and connected biologically to one of the killers. The implications horrified everyone involved. If Rachel Devereaux gave birth while imprisoned, what happened afterward? Investigators searched the basement again with renewed desperation. Hidden beneath loose concrete near the mattress, forensic teams discovered medical instruments, infant formula containers, and one tiny object sealed carefully inside cloth. A child's bracelet, faded blue lettering still visible beneath dust. Baby boy, July 1973. No name, no hospital identification. Nothing else. News of the discovery leaked within hours and detonated nationwide. Did serial killer victim give birth underground? Investigators searched for child connected to highway ghost. Tip lines flooded instantly with false leads, conspiracy theories, and terrified calls from people questioning family histories linked to adoption records during the 70s. But inside the task force, another realization spread quietly among investigators. Someone alive today might have been born inside Daniel Rainer's hidden chamber. Someone connected biologically to the murders. Someone who may not even know the truth. Then, late one night while reviewing restored audio tapes alone inside the laboratory, Dana Mercer heard something nobody noticed, previously buried near the end of a damaged recording involving Rachel. Weak at first, almost lost beneath static, a baby crying, then Rachel whispering frantically through tears, "Please don't take him upstairs." The tape crackled violently before another voice interrupted. "Come, male, older, Dr. Adrian Valle." You knew this arrangement was temporary. Rachel began screaming immediately afterward. The recording ended abruptly seconds later with a metallic door slamming shut. Dana reportedly sat frozen for several moments after hearing the audio because one horrifying possibility now became impossible to ignore. The child born beneath the farmhouse may have survived. And if he did, somebody spent 50 years making sure nobody ever found him. Then the laboratory lights suddenly went dark. The laboratory blackout lasted only 11 seconds according to security logs. But for Dana Mercer it felt endless because the moment darkness swallowed the forensic wing, she heard movement somewhere behind the evidence shelves. Slow footsteps, careful, deliberate. Every instinct inside her body screamed that somebody else was in the room. Emergency generators kicked on seconds later, flooding the laboratory with dim red backup lighting. And Dana turned sharply toward the audio station, where Rachel Devereaux's tape still spun inside the recorder. The cassette was gone. Investigators reviewing security footage later discovered something deeply unsettling. During the blackout, a hooded figure entered through a restricted maintenance corridor using valid staff credentials assigned to an employee who died 3 years earlier. The intruder moved with terrifying precision, straight to Dana's workstation, straight to the cassette tape, then vanished before primary power returned. No fingerprints, no usable facial image. Just one blurred frame capturing a man wearing dark gloves and carrying what appeared to be an old-fashioned lighter burning between his fingers. Detectives immediately recognized the symbolism. Fire. Smoke. Emily Voss's childhood description of the killer from room 12. The man smelled like smoke. Panic spread through the task force instantly because until that moment investigators believed Everyone directly involved in the Blackridge murders was dead. Daniel Rayner died in 1998. Dr. Adrian Vale died officially in 1991. Samuel Pike died in the cabin fire. But somebody alive today clearly understood the investigation intimately enough to infiltrate, secured forensic facilities, and steal evidence connected specifically to Rachel Devereaux's child. Sheriff Tom Avery ordered armed federal protection around every remaining piece of recovered evidence, while Internal Affairs launched emergency reviews of law enforcement personnel tied historically to the case. Yet even amid the security crisis, one realization dominated the investigation. The stolen tape confirmed the child mattered, more than investigators initially understood, because the intruder ignored DNA files, victim photographs, even evidence directly identifying Daniel Rayner. Instead, he targeted the one recording discussing the baby born underground in 1973. That meant protecting the child's identity remained important to someone after 50 years. Meanwhile, forensic genealogists worked around the clock, tracing the unknown male DNA profile, recovered from a Nebraska homicide scene connected biologically to Rachel Devereaux. Public ancestry databases produced increasingly narrow results. Investigators identified multiple second and third cousin matches clustering around one geographic region outside St. Louis. Adoption records from 1973 revealed something even stranger. In August of that year, barely weeks after the bracelet-marked baby boy, July 1973, a private church-affiliated agency processed an emergency closed adoption involving a male infant delivered anonymously without birth certificate or hospital documentation. The child's adoptive name, Michael Vale. The room inside task force headquarters reportedly froze because the surname matched Dr. Adrian Vale. Exactly. Detectives immediately tracked Michael Vale's current whereabouts. 49 years old. Respected criminal psychologist. Consultant for multiple law enforcement agencies across 3 states. Lecturer on violent offender behavior. Author of academic papers about serial homicide trauma patterns. Worse still, Michael consulted indirectly on cold case reviews involving highway ghost evidence during the early 2000s. Several investigators physically stepped away from briefing tables after hearing the revelation, because the implications felt almost unreal. A child potentially born inside captivity beneath Daniel Rayner's farmhouse grew up to become an expert helping police profile serial killers, while unknowingly connected biologically to the very crimes he studied. But another detail terrified detectives even more. Michael Vale maintained extensive professional access to evidence archives over the years, including facilities connected to the recent laboratory blackout. Authorities moved cautiously at first. Psychological analysts warned confronting Michael aggressively without proof could compromise the investigation catastrophically. So detectives initiated covert surveillance instead. They watched him lecture at universities, meet privately with retired investigators, attend conferences discussing cold case forensics. Outwardly, Michael appeared calm, intelligent, deeply respected. Yet agents monitoring him noticed disturbing patterns quickly. He smoked constantly despite respiratory problems. He visited isolated roadside motels during long drives without obvious reason. And several times surveillance teams observed him parking silently outside abandoned properties, connected historically to highway ghost victims. Then came the moment everything changed. During a covert search of archived adoption records, investigators uncovered sealed correspondence between Dr. Adrian Vale and St. Luke's Medical Chapel dated weeks after Rachel Devereaux disappeared. One letter referenced the boy's transition progressing successfully. Another mentioned keeping the mother compliant until transfer arrangements are finalized. But buried inside a final handwritten note, investigators discovered a phrase that reportedly chilled everyone in the room. The child must never learn where he came from. Detectives now faced an unbearable possibility. Michael Vale might not merely descend from one of the killers. He might be Rachel Devereaux's missing son, the baby born underground, raised afterward by the same man, potentially responsible for her captivity and death. Federal authorities authorized discreet DNA collection immediately. Agents retrieved discarded cigarette butts from Michael's vehicle and rushed them for comparison against evidence recovered from the farmhouse. The results arrived 48 hours later. Positive maternal match. Michael Vale was biologically related to Rachel Devereaux. The task force reportedly erupted into stunned silence because after 50 years, the impossible finally became real. The missing child survived. But if Michael truly descended from Rachel, then one question remained unavoidable. Did he know? Detectives debated strategy for hours before arranging a controlled interview under the pretense of consulting Michael professionally regarding historical offender behavior. The meeting occurred inside a federal office downtown beneath heavy security. Witnesses later described Michael as calm, articulate, slightly amused by investigators' questions initially. He discussed Daniel Rayner clinically, describing the highway ghost as an offender driven by ritualized control and surrogate family fantasies. But the atmosphere shifted instantly once Sheriff Avery placed Rachel Devereaux's photograph on the table. Michael stopped speaking. Completely. Investigators watched color drain slowly from his face. Then Avery asked quietly, "Did Dr. Adrian Vale ever tell you about her?" Michael reportedly stared at the photograph for nearly 20 seconds before whispering one sentence. "That picture was locked in my father's desk." The room froze. Michael explained that after Adrian Vale's death in 1991, he discovered sealed boxes containing photographs, motel receipts, medical records, and newspaper clippings related to missing women. Adrian always dismissed the material as research connected to psychiatric profiling. Michael believed him for years despite lingering unease. But after seeing media coverage about the reopened Blackridge investigation and Rachel's recovered evidence, he secretly began suspecting the truth. Then Michael revealed something devastating. The anonymous envelopes mailed to investigators came from him. Detectives reportedly reacted instantly, demanding why he withheld evidence. Michael's answer barely sounded human, "Because I was terrified of what I might be." According to Michael, after discovering Rachel's photograph and hidden files among Adrian Vale's possessions years earlier, he spent decades quietly investigating his own origins without alerting authorities. He eventually uncovered sealed adoption documents linking him indirectly to St. Luke's Chapel and began suspecting Adrian Vale was not his biological father. But Michael insisted he never understood the full horror until media coverage exposed the farmhouse basement and Rachel's captivity publicly. Then he admitted one final detail that shattered the room entirely. Adrian Vale did not die in a boating accident in 1991. Michael confessed he helped fake the physician's death using falsified dental records and cremation documents after Adrian claimed powerful enemies threatened them both. Detectives stared speechless as Michael explained how a terrified 18-year-old manipulated by the only father he ever knew assisted a serial predator's disappearance decades earlier, which meant one horrifying possibility suddenly became unavoidable. Dr. Adrian Vale might still be alive. Then Michael reached slowly into his coat pocket and removed a worn cassette tape investigators had never seen before. His hands visibly trembled while placing it on the table. "There's something else," he whispered. "My father kept this hidden from me until the week before he disappeared." Sheriff Avery turned the cassette over carefully. Handwritten across the label in faded ink sat 3 words that made the entire room go silent again. Rachel, final session. Nobody inside the federal briefing room spoke for several seconds after Sheriff Avery placed the cassette tape onto the table because everyone understood instinctively that whatever waited inside, Rachel, final session, could alter the entire investigation again. The tape looked old, even compared to other recordings recovered beneath Daniel Rayner's farmhouse. Yellowed plastic, cracked label, edges worn smooth from repeated handling. Michael Vale stared at it like a man confronting something alive. His hands would not stop shaking. Investigators noticed that immediately. Whatever he heard on the tape years earlier clearly haunted him long before the Blackridge murders. Resurfaced publicly. Federal audio specialists transferred the cassette into an isolated forensic lab underarmed. Supervision that same night. Nobody wanted another theft. Nobody wanted another blackout. The task force gathered behind reinforced glass while technicians cleaned the deteriorated reel, carefully enough to preserve every second possible. Then the recording began. Static first, heavy breathing, metallic echoes from underground somewhere beneath the farmhouse. Then Rachel Devereaux's voice emerged weakly through crackling distortion. Older than on previous tapes, exhausted, but unmistakably alive. The laboratory reportedly went completely silent. Rachel sounded calmer this time compared to earlier recordings recovered from the basement. No screaming, no panic, just fatigue so deep it felt almost hollow. Investigators listened as she spoke quietly with Dr. Adrian Vale for nearly 30 uninterrupted minutes. The conversation disturbed everyone in the room because the dynamic between captor and victim had evolved into something psychologically devastating. Rachel challenged him openly now, asked questions, forced him into conversations about morality, guilt, loneliness, childhood trauma. At one point, Vale admitted he hated Daniel Rayner, but needed him to accomplish difficult tasks. Another moment revealed something even darker. Vale confessed he believed Rachel was different from the others because she continued speaking to him like a human being despite everything done to her. Detectives listening reportedly struggled emotionally because Rachel sounded less like a prisoner, begging for survival, and more like someone trying desperately to keep a monster psychologically stable long enough to stay alive. Then the conversation shifted toward Michael. Rachel asked directly where her child had been taken. Vale answered calmly, safe. Rachel demanded proof the boy was alive. Silence followed for nearly 20 seconds before investigators heard faint crying in the background. A baby. Rachel immediately broke down sobbing. The room inside the laboratory reportedly became unbearable. Even veteran homicide detectives looked away while listening because after 50 years the recording proved Rachel Devereaux heard her child alive but remained trapped underground, unable to reach him. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Rachel whispered through tears, "You can't hide him forever." Vale answered softly, almost affectionately, "No, but I can teach him to become something better than us." Detectives exchanged alarmed glances instantly. The statement sounded less like adoption and more like grooming, conditioning, shaping a child born from horror into something under Vale's control. But the true shock arrived minutes later. Rachel suddenly asked a question nobody expected. What happened to Emily? The room froze. Investigators replayed the line immediately because the implication struck like lightning. Emily Voss, the little girl who survived room 12 in 1974, somehow mattered directly to Rachel. Devereaux years earlier. Vale hesitated before answering. She remembers less than you think. Rachel snapped back instantly. That child saw your face. The task force erupted into chaos. Detectives began pulling archived timelines across briefing screens because Rachel disappeared officially in 1972. 2 years before the Blackridge Motel murders involving Emily Voss, which meant Rachel survived captivity far longer than anyone imagined, potentially until 1974 or beyond. Worse still, she apparently knew details about the Blackridge killings while imprisoned underground. Then the tape revealed the horrifying truth. Vale admitted Rachel witnessed preparation for the Blackridge Motel attack shortly before Emily and her mother arrived unexpectedly during a storm. According to the recording, Daniel Rayner selected victims opportunistically while traveling highways. But Vale orchestrated specific killings intentionally to test police response patterns and media attention across jurisdictions. Blackridge became one of those planned events. Rachel began screaming when she realized another child had been present during the attack. "You said families weren't part of this," she shouted. Vale answered coldly. The mother was the target. The child complicated matters. Investigators listening behind the glass reportedly reacted with visible fury because for decades, the Blackridge Motel murder was treated publicly as chaotic violence committed by a roaming predator. But now the recording exposed horrifying premeditation involving psychological experimentation, media manipulation, and calculated victim selection. Then Rachel said something that made the entire laboratory stop breathing. Danny wanted to kill the little girl too. Emily Voss survived only because Adrian Vale stopped Daniel Rayner from murdering her. The revelation stunned investigators because it completely shattered assumptions about the relationship between the two men. Rayner emerged increasingly as the impulsive violence behind the killings while Vale functioned as strategist, manipulator, protector of secrecy. But why spare Emily? That answer came moments later. Vale admitted the surviving witness fascinated him. He wanted to observe childhood trauma over time, study memory degradation, fear, psychological survival. Detectives reportedly stared at each other in disbelief because Emily Voss spent 50 years haunted by a serial killer who intentionally allowed her to live as part of an experiment. Then the recording descended into chaos. Loud banging echoed somewhere above Rachel's underground room. Daniel Rayner's voice erupted in the background, screaming furiously about the woman in Nebraska. Vale tried calming him unsuccessfully. Rachel began crying again. Investigators heard furniture overturning, footsteps pounding through corridors, metallic doors slamming violently. Then Rayner suddenly shouted something that detonated through the task force instantly. She saw the boy upstairs. Silence consumed the laboratory. Detectives replayed the sentence repeatedly because until that moment investigators assumed Michael remained hidden entirely after birth. But Rayner's statement suggested at least one victim saw the child connected to Rachel and Vale. Which woman? What happened afterward? The tape answered almost immediately. Vale whispered urgently to Rachel that another captive discovered the existence of her son, accidentally while being transported through the farmhouse. The woman threatened to contact police if released. Rayner wanted her dead immediately. Rachel begged Vale to let the woman go anyway. Instead, according to the recording, Vale transferred the victim personally to Blackridge Motel days before Emily Voss arrived there with her mother during the storm. Investigators realized the horrifying connection all at once. Emily's mother may never have been the intended target originally. She walked unknowingly into an active containment operation surrounding Rachel's hidden child. The implications made detectives physically ill. Then the tape reached its final minutes. Rachel sounded weaker now, fading. Vale spoke softly beside her for several moments, almost tenderly, while machinery hummed somewhere nearby. He told Rachel the boy would never learn the truth about his birth because monsters create monsters. Rachel answered with one final sentence investigators would later describe publicly as the emotional center of the entire Blackridge case. Then teach him how to be kind. Seconds later, the recording ended abruptly beneath static and a distant metallic door closing. Underground. No further audio followed. Nobody inside the laboratory moved for a long time afterward. Sheriff Avery eventually removed his glasses quietly while technicians shut off playback equipment. Several investigators later admitted the tape affected them more deeply than any evidence recovered during the case because Rachel Devereaux's final words carried no hatred, no revenge, no plea for rescue anymore. Only concern for the child stolen from her beneath the farmhouse. But the investigation itself exploded into deeper chaos almost immediately afterward. Because while analysts reviewed the tape overnight, another forensic team examining Adrian Vale's financial archives uncovered recent activity on a dormant offshore account linked directly to him. Transactions occurred less than 6 months earlier. Large withdrawals, international transfers. Somebody using Vale's identity remained alive in the present day. And according to attached surveillance records from a banking terminal in Montreal, the elderly man accessing the account still smoked constantly with his left hand, exactly as witnesses described Adrian Vale 50 years earlier. Then the final image loaded onto investigator screens. Grainy security footage. Snow falling outside the bank entrance. An old man in a dark coat turning briefly toward the camera. Thin now, wrinkled, almost skeletal, but unmistakably alive. Dr. Adrian Vale had survived for decades after faking his death. And somewhere out there, the real architect behind the Highway Ghost murders was still breathing. The moment investigators confirmed Adrian Vale was still alive, the Blackridge Task Force stopped feeling like a cold case investigation and started resembling a manhunt for a ghost who had survived half a century inside the cracks of forgotten institutions. Federal agencies flooded into the operation overnight. Interpol became involved. Canadian authorities opened emergency intelligence channels after surveillance footage from Montreal verified recent activity connected to Vale's dormant accounts. Yet despite the urgency, something about the old psychiatrist's movements unsettled investigators immediately. He behaved like a man expecting pursuit. The withdrawals were small, precise, spread across different regions over several years. Rental records connected to fake identities surfaced near isolated lakeside towns, monasteries, and private medical retreats stretching through Quebec and northern Maine. Vale had spent decades disappearing professionally, and judging by the evidence trail, he never stopped preparing for the possibility that someone would eventually uncover the truth buried beneath Daniel Rayner's farmhouse. Meanwhile, public reaction to the Rachel Devereaux tape became explosive once portions leaked online. Through anonymous sources, news channels replayed Rachel's final sentence repeatedly. Then teach him how to be kind. The quote spread nationwide beneath headlines about captivity, hidden children, and serial murder conspiracies spanning generations. Emily Voss released her first public statement in 40 years after hearing the tape privately with investigators, standing outside her Oregon home surrounded by reporters. The now gray-haired survivor struggled to speak through tears. "That woman tried saving me without ever meeting me," she whispered. "I want people to remember her name before they remember his." Across the country, memorials appeared for Rachel Devereaux beside older tributes honoring Blackridge. Victims long forgotten by most of the public. But behind closed doors, investigators focused on something far darker. Because the surviving tapes and financial records increasingly suggested Adrian Vale did not simply flee after the murders. He maintained contact with someone for decades. Someone helping him move money, obtain identities, and monitor investigations connected to the Highway Ghost case. The possibility terrified authorities. If Vale operated with assistance all these years, then parts of the network surrounding the murders might still exist intact. Federal analysts revisited every individual historically connected to St. Luke's Medical Chapel, Hawthorne Adoption Services, and Daniel Rayner's business routes. One name surfaced repeatedly in archive communications tied indirectly to Vale's hidden finances. Eleanor Shaw, former psychiatric nurse, longtime administrator at St. Luke's during the 70s. Officially retired since 1994. Living quietly near Quebec under Canadian citizenship obtained shortly after Vale's supposed death. Investigators moved carefully before approaching her. Surveillance teams described Shaw as deeply routine-oriented, daily walks, church attendance, grocery trips, smoking outside her apartment late at night, regardless of weather. But something else caught attention immediately. Every Thursday evening, Shaw drove 40 miles north to an isolated nursing facility near the woods. Outside Mont-Tremblant, she stayed exactly 90 minutes each visit. No registered family member appeared connected to the facility. Detectives feared the obvious immediately. Adrian Vale might be hiding there. Canadian authorities coordinated a discreet operation under heavy secrecy, while federal analysts continued dissecting evidence recovered from the farmhouse basement. Then another discovery changed the emotional center of the case again. During restoration of damaged audio tapes overlooked initially due to severe corruption, technicians uncovered several minutes of recording involving a child's voice investigators had never heard before. A little boy, approximately 4 or 5 years old, soft-spoken, curious. The laboratory reportedly fell silent as analysts realized they were hearing Michael Vale himself as a child sometime around 1978. The tape captured Adrian Vale speaking gently with the boy about memory and truth while distant. Thunder rolled outside. Michael asked why he could never meet his real mother. Adrian answered carefully, "Because she's somewhere peaceful now." Then the child asked another question that visibly disturbed investigators listening through headphones. Did Danny hurt her like the other ladies? The room froze instantly. Detectives replayed the sentence repeatedly because it proved Michael knew about the victims as a small child. Not fully, not consciously perhaps, but enough to ask questions. Enough to absorb fragments of horror growing up around Adrian Vale after Rachel disappeared. Then the tape became even more unsettling. Adrian asked young Michael whether he remembered the room downstairs. Long silence followed before the child whispered, "I don't like the chains." Several investigators reportedly stepped out of the laboratory afterward physically shaken because the recording suggested Michael spent part of early childhood inside environments connected directly to the captivity chambers beneath the farmhouse. The psychological implications horrified everyone involved. Michael Vale was not simply a hidden child born from violence. He was raised inside the shadow of it. Meanwhile, the surveillance operation in Quebec intensified rapidly after Eleanor Shaw altered her routine unexpectedly following public leaks about Adrian Vale's survival. She began burning documents behind her apartment complex late at night, purchased large quantities of medical supplies and cigarettes. Most alarming of all, investigators observed her carrying boxes repeatedly into the isolated nursing facility north of Mont-Tremblant. Authorities feared Vale planned to disappear again. Tactical teams prepared emergency warrants immediately. The raid began shortly after 3 a.m. during freezing snowfall under complete media blackout. Canadian officers surrounded the nursing facility silently while federal agents entered through rear corridors leading toward restricted medical wings. Elderly patients slept through most of the operation unaware history was crashing through the building around them. Eleanor Shaw was located first inside a basement records room attempting to destroy documents in an industrial furnace. Witnesses later describe her expression not as fearful but exhausted, like someone who spent decades waiting for inevitable collapse. But when agents demanded Adrian Vale's location, Shaw reportedly whispered something that stopped the room cold. "You're too late." Officers stormed deeper into the facility immediately. then inside a private medical suite hidden behind locked security doors. Investigators finally found him. Adrian Vale, 91 years old, frail, oxygen tubes running beneath his nose, sitting upright beside a window overlooking falling snow. The infamous psychiatrist reportedly looked toward entering officers without surprise whatsoever. A cigarette burned slowly between his fingers despite oxygen warnings surrounding the room. One federal marshal later described the moment bluntly. It felt like arresting death itself. Vale offered no resistance, no denial, no confusion. He simply asked whether Michael was safe before agents removed the cigarette from his hand. News of the arrest detonated worldwide before sunrise. Highway ghost mastermind captured after 50 years. Serial murder architect found alive in Canada. Outside Black Ridge Task Force headquarters, families of victims gathered crying openly as reporters. Broadcast live from every major network. Emily Voss reportedly locked herself inside a hotel room for hours after hearing the news. Michael Vale disappeared entirely from public view beneath federal protection while investigators prepared formal interrogations with Adrian Vale for the first time in history. But almost immediately, the old psychiatrist began controlling the atmosphere around him exactly as investigators feared. During medical intake examinations, Vale remained eerily composed, polite, intelligent, almost amused by younger detectives confronting him with photographs of victims. He admitted knowing Daniel Rayner, admitted orchestrating parts of the adoption concealment involving Michael. But whenever investigators pushed toward direct confessions regarding murder, Vale redirected conversations skillfully into philosophical discussions about violence, fear, and human memory. People don't remember evil accurately, he reportedly told one profiler calmly. They remember emotion. Detectives left early sessions visibly frustrated because despite overwhelming circumstantial evidence, Vale understood exactly how to manipulate interviews psychologically after a lifetime studying criminal behavior. Then, during his third interrogation, investigators placed Rachel Devereaux's photograph on the table without warning. Witnesses later described the first genuine emotional reaction Vale displayed since arrest. His hands trembled slightly, only once. Then he asked quietly, "Did Michael hear the final tape?" Sheriff Avery answered yes. Vale reportedly closed his eyes for several moments before whispering something investigators almost missed entirely. "She would hate what I made him become." The statement rattled the room because Michael Vale remained cooperative, empathetic, horrified by the investigation unfolding around him. Nothing about his behavior reflected the violence surrounding his origins. Yet Adrian spoke as though Michael carried damage investigators still failed to recognize. Then Vale requested a private meeting with Emily Voss specifically. No lawyers, no federal prosecutors, just the surviving child from room 12. Authorities refused immediately. But before officers escorted him back toward holding cells, Adrian Vale turned once more toward Sheriff Avery and delivered a sentence that reportedly haunted investigators afterward more than any confession. "You still haven't found the worst place," he said softly. Then he smiled for the first time since his arrest. Adrian Vale's smile became the image replayed endlessly across news networks for the next 48 hours because investigators could not explain it. 91 years old, frail, shackled, surrounded by armed federal officers. Yet the old psychiatrist looked almost satisfied while warning detectives they still had not found the worst place. The statement poisoned the entire task force immediately. Search warrants expanded overnight across every property, institution, retreat clinic, an abandoned structure remotely connected to Vale or Daniel Rayner during the 70s and 80s. Cadaver dogs swept forests. Divers searched wells and flooded quarries. Former patients from St. Luke's Medical Chapel flooded hotlines describing underground treatment rooms, sedatives, isolation experiments, and children wandering corridors late at night. The Blackridge investigation no longer resembled a serial murder case. It resembled excavation of an entire hidden system buried beneath decades of fear and silence. Yet amid the chaos, one issue divided federal authorities internally more than any other: Adrian Vale's request to meet Emily Voss. Prosecutors argued the surviving witness remained too psychologically vulnerable after 50 years of trauma. Behavioral analysts warned Vale specialized in manipulation and could use the meeting to regain control of public narrative surrounding the murders. But Emily herself pushed back aggressively after hearing about the request. For the first time since childhood, she wanted answers directly from a man investigators believed spared her intentionally inside room 12. "He watched me live with this my whole life," she reportedly told Sheriff Avery during a private call. "Now he gets a look at me while I ask why." Authorities eventually approved the meeting under extreme supervision. The encounter took place inside a secured federal interview suite in Montreal while cameras recorded every second. Emily entered first wearing dark clothing and carrying the same stuffed rabbit recovered beside her mother's body in 1974. The toy remained stained faintly brown despite decades of restoration attempts. Investigators later admitted the atmosphere inside the room felt unbearable before Vale even arrived. Then officers escorted Adrian Vale inside slowly. The old psychiatrist paused the moment he saw the rabbit. Witnesses described genuine shock crossing his face for the first time publicly since arrest. Emily remained standing. She did not shake his hand, did not sit down. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Then Emily finally asked the question haunting the country for half a century. "Why did you let me live?" Vale looked toward her carefully, almost clinically, before answering. "Because you looked at me without understanding what I was." Emily's expression hardened instantly. "You murdered my mother." Vale nodded once. No denial, no hesitation. The room reportedly froze because it marked the first direct admission tying him personally to the Blackridge Motel murder. But Emily kept pushing. Why spare the child? Why destroy so many women? Why Rachel? Vale answered some questions, avoided others. According to interrogation transcripts later partially released publicly, he described Daniel Rayner as violence without discipline, a man driven by impulse and rage whom Vale manipulated for transportation and disposal purposes. He admitted selecting victims intentionally based on isolation patterns and media response. Potential. But whenever Rachel Devereaux's name surfaced, Vale's demeanor shifted visibly. Less detached, almost regretful. Then Emily asked the question nobody prepared for. Did Rachel die in that basement? Vale reportedly stared at the table silently for nearly 20 seconds before whispering, "No." The room inside the observation suite erupted immediately. Detectives began shouting questions through communication headsets while prosecutors scrambled toward the interview chamber. Emily herself looked physically stunned. Rachel Devereaux officially remained presumed dead for 50 years based on overwhelming circumstantial evidence. Yet Adrian Vale, now, claimed otherwise. Emily leaned forward slowly. "Where is she?" Vale's answer detonated through the task force instantly. She escaped. Silence swallowed the room. Investigators replayed the recording repeatedly afterward because the statement changed the entire timeline again. According to Vale, Rachel Devereaux survived captivity beneath the farmhouse until late 1975. During a violent confrontation with Daniel Rayner, she managed escaping through service tunnels connected to abandoned drainage systems beneath the property. Vale insisted he attempted finding her afterward unsuccessfully. Emily demanded proof. Vale answered quietly, "Because she sent me letters for years." Federal agents moved immediately after the interview ended. Search teams tore through Adrian Vale's hidden archives recovered in Quebec while analysts hunted, desperately for correspondence connected to Rachel. Then, buried inside sealed medical journals hidden beneath false compartments in Vale's nursing facility suite, investigators found them. Letters, dozens of them, written in Rachel Devereaux's handwriting between 1976 and 1989 from locations scattered across the United States under different aliases. The discovery sent shockwaves worldwide. One of the most infamous presumed victims in serial murder history may have survived for over a decade after escaping captivity. But the letters themselves horrified investigators for another reason entirely. Rachel never contacted police directly, never exposed Vale publicly. Instead, the correspondence revealed an emotionally shattered woman trapped in a bizarre psychological relationship with the man who destroyed her life. Some letters begged Vale to surrender himself. Others discussed Michael from afar after secretly observing him growing up. Several sounded almost compassionate toward Vale despite everything he had done. Behavioral experts reviewing the documents described classic trauma bonding patterns emerging from prolonged captivity and manipulation. Yet, buried within the letters, investigators uncovered another devastating detail. Rachel repeatedly warned Vale about the lower tunnels. Detectives immediately returned to the farmhouse excavation site with structural engineers and advanced mapping equipment. Previous searches focused mainly on basement chambers already discovered beneath the house. But Rachel's references suggested something larger extending underground beyond investigators' original understanding. Ground scans soon revealed voids stretching far beneath surrounding fields, older than the farmhouse itself, abandoned mining tunnels dating back to the early 20th century. Authorities launched dangerous excavation operations immediately. Days later, search teams forced through collapsed shafts leading into underground corridors untouched. For decades, the atmosphere reportedly became suffocating almost instantly. Stale air, standing water, rusted rail, equipment disappearing into darkness beneath miles of earth. Then investigators found the doors. Heavy steel, reinforced from the outside, hidden deep within the tunnel network beneath the property. Several bore scratch marks along interior surfaces. Others still contained remnants of restraints bolted into concrete walls. Federal agents entering the underground chambers described the experience later as walking into industrialized fear. But the true horror waited deeper inside. Near the end of one flooded corridor, investigators discovered a large sealed room preserved, partially by cold underground conditions. Children's drawings covered sections of the walls, names scratched repeatedly into rusted pipes. Medical examination tables stood beside piles of decayed clothing and broken toys. Forensic teams realized immediately the chambers were used not merely for murder, but prolonged confinement involving multiple victims over many years. Then came the discovery that made seasoned investigators physically stagger backward. Human remains. Not one or two, dozens, juvenile and adult, buried beneath shallow concrete layers across the underground complex. The room inside command headquarters reportedly fell silent as forensic estimates suggested the tunnel network beneath Rayner's property may contain one of the largest hidden serial murder burial grounds ever uncovered in the region. News helicopters filled the sky again while grieving families gathered outside barricades clutching photographs of missing relatives stretching back generations. Yet even amid the horror, investigators focused urgently on Rachel Devereaux's survival. If she escaped in 1975 and lived for years afterward, where did she go eventually? Why stop writing Vale in 1989? And most importantly, was she still alive somewhere now? Then analysts examining the final recovered letter noticed something previously overlooked. Rachel referenced the place by the water where the children sang at night. The phrase triggered immediate alarm inside the task force because another property tied historically to Adrian Vale matched the description precisely. Camp Mercer, an abandoned lakeside psychiatric retreat for troubled youth, shut down in 1988 after allegations of abuse and unexplained disappearances. Detectives pulled archived photographs instantly. One image stopped everyone cold. Standing near the retreat dock during summer 1977 beside several unidentified children was a woman. Investigators recognized immediately despite the years. Older, thinner, but unmistakably Rachel Devereaux. Alive, watching the camera with terrified eyes. And beside her stood a 4-year-old blonde boy holding her hand. Michael Vale. The photograph from Camp Mercer shattered the investigation in ways no forensic discovery ever could. Because suddenly the story was no longer about a dead victim hidden underground for 50 years. Rachel Devereaux had survived. She escaped the farmhouse. She found her son again. And somehow, for reasons investigators still could not understand, she remained trapped within Adrian Vale's orbit long after fleeing captivity. The image spread through federal briefing rooms like a ghost resurrected from history itself. Rachel stood near the lake dock wearing oversized clothing and a forced expression that detectives described as fear disguised as calm. But it was Michael that drew immediate attention. 4 years old, blonde hair, thin frame, holding Rachel's hand tightly while staring downward at the ground. Analysts enlarged the photograph, repeatedly searching for details hidden in the background. Then they noticed the other children, at least 7 boys and girls standing farther behind near the retreat cabins. None identified in public Camp Mercer records. Some appeared frightened, others expressionless. One child visibly wore a hospital-style wristband similar to the bracelet recovered beneath Daniel Rayner's farmhouse. The implications horrified investigators instantly. Camp Mercer may not have been a psychiatric retreat at all. It may have functioned as an extension of the same hidden system surrounding Vale and Rayner for decades. Federal authorities sealed the abandoned property within hours. News helicopters circled over the frozen lakeside grounds while tactical teams swept deteriorating cabins buried beneath pine trees and heavy snow. Camp Mercer had remained untouched since closure in 1988 after a fire destroyed one wing during a violent storm. Local rumors persisted for years afterward. Children screaming at night across the lake. Unmarked graves near the shoreline. Staff members vanishing without explanation. But nobody investigated seriously because the retreat officially operated under private psychiatric licensing protected by powerful donors connected to Adrian Vale's foundations. Now the truth was finally clawing upward through the ruins. Investigators entered the retreat cautiously because structural damage left parts of the property unstable. Mold-covered walls. Water dripped steadily through collapsed ceilings. Children's drawings still hung inside hallways beside faded therapy slogans and medical charts, abandoned in place decades earlier. Yet the deeper teams moved into the retreat, the stranger the atmosphere became. Certain rooms appeared intentionally preserved despite years of decay. Beds neatly made, files organized carefully, cigarette ashtrays cleaned recently enough that detectives immediately suspected someone visited the property long after official closure. Then search teams reached the lower medical wing beneath the burned section of the retreat. Locked steel doors blocked access to underground corridors hidden from original architectural blueprints. Federal agents forced entry and descended into darkness, carrying floodlights and respirators. The smell hit first. Damp concrete. Chemicals. Something rotten trapped underground for years. One investigator later described the sensation bluntly. It felt exactly like the farmhouse basement. The corridors beneath Camp Mercer stretched farther than anyone expected. Observation rooms lined one side. Medical bays lined the other. Thick reinforced windows allowed hidden monitoring into isolated chambers containing rusted beds and restraint systems bolted directly into walls. Investigators immediately realized the underground wing operated secretly outside public oversight. Entirely. But the true shock arrived inside an office preserved near the rear of the complex. Photographs. Hundreds of them. Children, women, families. Newspaper clippings about missing persons. Audio tapes labeled by first names and dates exactly like those recovered beneath Rayner's farmhouse. And near the desk, investigators discovered recent cigarette burns still fresh enough to smear. Beneath gloved fingers. Someone had been inside the underground facility recently. Very recently. Then forensic teams uncovered a locked filing cabinet, requiring specialized tools to open. Inside sat patient records spanning nearly 20 years. Most names were coded or falsified. But one file carried a label that froze the room instantly. Subject M, Transition Observation Logs. Michael Vale. Detectives reportedly stopped breathing while turning pages. The records documented psychological evaluations conducted on Michael throughout childhood by Adrian. Vale personally. Sleep studies. Behavioral conditioning notes. Exposure response experiments involving fear and isolation. Several entries referenced Rachel Devereaux visiting the retreat under supervision. One note from 1978 described Michael becoming agitated when separated from maternal subject. Another included a sentence that made veteran investigators physically ill. The child displays increasing empathy traits inconsistent with inherited pathology. Inherited pathology. Adrian Vale spent years studying whether violence passed biologically through bloodlines connected to the murders. Michael was not simply hidden or adopted. He was raised inside an experiment designed to determine whether the son of a captive victim and serial offender would eventually become monstrous himself. Then investigators found Rachel's final file. Thin compared to others. Incomplete, but devastating. According to records dated 1981, Rachel attempted escaping Camp Mercer with Michael after discovering hidden chambers beneath the retreat containing confined children transferred from foster systems and psychiatric institutions. Staff intercepted the attempt near the lake. Afterward, Rachel reportedly attacked Adrian Vale with surgical scissors during a confrontation. Witnessed by Michael himself. The next pages were missing completely, torn out intentionally. Detectives searched desperately for continuation records, but found nothing else except one final notation written in Vale's handwriting across the inside cover. Maternal subject removed following incident. Removed. No explanation. No death certificate. No burial location. Nothing. Yet investigators realized something terrifying immediately. Rachel vanished from Adrian Vale's correspondence archives around the exact same period, which meant one possibility suddenly became unavoidable. Rachel Devereaux may have died at Camp Mercer after trying to rescue her son and the other children. Hidden underground. The discovery triggered furious interrogations with Adrian Vale back in federal custody. But the old psychiatrist remained maddeningly controlled despite mounting evidence. When confronted about Camp Mercer, he admitted operating unauthorized behavioral treatment programs involving abandoned and psychologically troubled children during the 70s and 80s. He denied murder directly, denied torture, denied trafficking. Yet every answer twisted carefully around specifics, leaving investigators increasingly convinced Vale still concealed the worst truths intentionally. Then prosecutors showed him the photograph of Rachel and Michael standing together beside the lake. Witnesses later described a visible crack appearing in Vale's composure for the first time since arrest. He stared at the image for several seconds before whispering almost to himself, "She should have left when she had the chance." Detectives pushed harder immediately. What happened after the escape attempt? Where was Rachel buried? Vale remained silent. Then he said something that chilled the interrogation room instantly. "You think Daniel Rayner was the monster because monsters are easier when they look violent." Nobody spoke. Vale leaned back slowly in his chair beneath the fluorescent lights. "But Danny killed from rage. I killed because I believed broken things could become useful." The statement reportedly shook even experienced profilers because Adrian Vale did not describe himself like a predator. He described himself like a scientist defending research. Then he smiled faintly again. Rachel understood that before the end. Federal prosecutors ended the interview immediately afterward, fearing Vale was intentionally destabilizing investigators psychologically. But while interrogations continued, forensic excavation beneath Camp Mercer produced another devastating discovery. Near the frozen lakeshore behind the retreat, cadaver dogs alerted repeatedly beside an old boathouse partially collapsed into the snow. Excavation teams uncovered shallow graves containing remains of at least 11 children buried beneath layers of concrete and ash dating back to the retreat fire in 1988. Some victims were never reported missing officially. Others matched children removed from state care systems decades earlier under psychiatric transfer. Programs connected indirectly to St. Luke's Chapel. The country reacted with horror bordering on national obsession. Camp Mercer child graves exposed. Psychiatric retreat linked to serial murder network. Protesters gathered outside government buildings demanding investigations into institutional corruption protecting Adrian Vale for decades. Survivors from foster systems began contacting authorities describing abuse, disappearances, and underground punishment rooms connected to facilities funded by Vale's charities. The case widened endlessly like infection spreading through buried history. Yet amid the national outrage, Michael Vale himself collapsed emotionally beneath the weight of revelations surrounding his childhood. Federal psychologists monitoring him reported severe insomnia, panic episodes, and memory disturbances triggered by recovered photographs from Camp Mercer. Then late one night, during protected debriefing, Michael suddenly remembered something investigators had never heard before. A woman singing softly beside water during thunderstorms. Rachel. And another memory immediately afterward. Adrian Vale dragging him away while smoke filled the retreat halls during the 1988 fire. Michael reportedly broke down completely once the memory surfaced because for the first time in his life he realized he may have seen his mother alive the night Camp Mercer burned. Then he whispered a sentence that made federal agents exchange alarmed glances instantly. "I think she told me where to find her." The memory surfaced inside Michael Vale like something clawing upward from deep underwater after decades buried beneath fear, sedation, and carefully constructed lies. Federal psychologists described the episode as abrupt and overwhelming. One moment, Michael sat silent inside the secure interview suite, staring blankly at photographs from Camp Mercer. The next, he began shaking violently, gripping both sides of his head while fragments of childhood returned in flashes sharp enough to make him physically ill. Rain pounding against cabin windows. Smoke drifting through hallways. Rachel kneeling beside him, whispering urgently while alarms screamed somewhere underground. Then one sentence repeating over and over inside his memory. "By the water with the singing stones." Investigators froze instantly because the phrase matched nothing previously recovered from camp Mercer records. Yet Michael insisted Rachel repeated it the night of the fire in 1988 while pushing him toward safety through smoke-filled corridors beneath the retreat. According to his fragmented recollection, Rachel believed she would not escape. But before Adrian Vale dragged Michael away, she whispered directions to the place where the lake sings. The task force moved immediately. Local historians familiar with the Camp Mercer property identified an old geological landmark near. The northern shoreline, known decades earlier as the Singing Stones, a cluster of hollow rock. Formations along the frozen lake edge that produced eerie whistling sounds when wind moved through them during storms. The area sat nearly 2 miles from the main retreat, hidden behind dense forest untouched since the fire. Search teams deployed before sunrise beneath brutal weather conditions. Snow buried most trails entirely while freezing winds swept across the lake hard enough to halt helicopters repeatedly. Yet experienced investigators felt growing dread the deeper they pushed toward the shoreline, because if Rachel Devereaux truly left clues there before disappearing, the answers waiting beneath the ice might finally reveal what happened after Camp Mercer burned. The Singing Stones appeared near dusk through blowing snow like jagged black teeth emerging from the frozen lakeshore. Wind passed through narrow holes in the rock formations, creating low, haunting whistles that echoed across the water exactly as local legends described. Search crews began ground scans immediately, while divers prepared thermal drilling equipment near sections of unusually thin ice. Then cadaver dogs alerted almost instantly beside a collapsed wooden structure buried beneath decades of snow and debris. Investigators uncovered remnants of an old maintenance shed once connected to Camp Mercer utilities. Inside, beneath rotted floorboards, they found a narrow metal hatch sealed with rusted chains. The atmosphere around the site changed immediately. Veteran detectives later admitted everyone present knew instinctively what waited below. Federal agents forced the hatch open slowly. A ladder descended into darkness beneath the frozen shoreline. Stale air rose upward, carrying the unmistakable smell investigators associated now with every property tied to Adrian Vale. Damp concrete, mold, death. Floodlights illuminated a hidden underground chamber extending beneath the lake itself. Unlike the brutal industrial confinement rooms beneath the farmhouse, this space looked almost peaceful at first glance. Shelving, blankets, candles melted into old wine bottles. Children's books stacked carefully beside a mattress. The room appeared inhabited once by someone hiding, not imprisoning others. Then search teams discovered the wall. Hundreds of handwritten notes covered the concrete surface from floor to ceiling. Dates, names, fragments of prayers, sketches of children, repeated phrases about memory and guilt. Investigators recognized Rachel Devereaux's handwriting immediately. The chamber beneath the Singing Stones had been her hiding place after escaping Camp Mercer during the fire. Forensic teams moved through the underground space in stunned silence while cameras documented everything. Rachel survived longer than anyone imagined. Some notes dated as late as 1992, 4 years after the retreat fire and 1 year after Adrian Vale supposedly died in the boating accident. She remained alive somewhere around the lake for years afterward, hiding underground while authorities believed her dead for decades. But the writings themselves revealed a woman psychologically unraveling beneath trauma and isolation. Rachel described hearing children crying at night across the frozen water long after Camp Mercer closed. She wrote repeatedly about Michael, wondering whether he remembered her voice. Some entries pleaded with herself not to contact him directly because Vale poisoned his life enough already. Yet one final series of notes near the back wall changed the entire investigation again. Rachel believed someone else survived Camp Mercer besides herself. A child. A girl hidden underground during the fire. Detectives immediately revisited missing persons lists tied to the retreat, while forensic teams searched deeper into the chamber. Near a concealed alcove beneath loose stone, investigators uncovered clothing bundles, canned food supplies, and a rusted lockbox wrapped carefully in waterproof cloth. Inside sat photographs, cassette tapes, and a journal bearing Rachel Devereaux's full name across the cover. Sheriff Avery reportedly opened the journal himself while snow hammered against the shoreline above. The first pages described Rachel's escape from Daniel Rayner's farmhouse in horrifying detail, crawling through drainage tunnels while Rayner beat another captive nearby, wandering through fields half-starved and delirious before Adrian Vale found her again weeks later. Instead of killing her, Vale transported Rachel to Camp Mercer, where she remained near Michael under heavy supervision for years. The journal revealed Rachel stayed initially because she feared losing her son forever if she ran again. But over time, she discovered the retreat's true purpose. Children transferred secretly from foster systems, psychiatric wards, and state institutions were subjected to experimental isolation treatments, behavioral conditioning, and psychological trauma studies orchestrated by Vale beneath the guise of therapy. Some children disappeared entirely. Rachel documented names obsessively, hoping someone would eventually uncover the truth. Then came the final entries dated the night Camp Mercer burned in 1988. According to Rachel's account, Daniel Rayner returned unexpectedly to the retreat drunk and unstable after years away. He accused Vale of turning the boy soft and threatened taking Michael permanently. A violent confrontation erupted underground while electrical systems failed during a thunderstorm. Rachel used the chaos to free several confined children before fire spread through the lower medical wing. The journal described smoke, screaming, collapsing corridors. Then one final chilling revelation emerged near the last pages. Daniel Rayner did not die naturally in 1998, as authorities believed. Rachel claimed Adrian Vale murdered him years earlier after the Camp Mercer fire to silence him permanently. The room inside the underground chamber reportedly fell completely silent as investigators processed the implication. Adrian Vale spent decades erasing loose ends connected to the Highway Ghost Network, including his own partner. But Rachel's final journal entry proved even more devastating emotionally. Written shakily in fading ink sometime around 1992, it described Rachel watching Michael from a distance during adulthood for the last time. She believed he grew into a compassionate man despite everything Adrian Vale did to shape him. Psychologically, maybe kindness survives even here, she wrote. Then came the final sentence. If anyone finds this, tell Michael I never stopped looking for him. The entry ended there. No further pages followed. No indication what happened afterward. But investigators searching deeper inside the shoreline chamber soon discovered something else. Hidden beneath loose stones near the rear wall. Human remains. One body, female, curled beside the concrete as though lying down to sleep. A rusted revolver rested nearby. Forensic teams worked silently for hours while snowstorms raged above the lake. Dental records later confirmed the identity officially. Rachel Devereaux, dead approximately 30 years. The country reacted with collective grief once authorities announced the discovery publicly. Vigils formed outside Camp Mercer and Black Ridge simultaneously while national headlines described Rachel as both survivor and hero after evidence confirmed she helped children escape the retreat during the fire. Yet amid the mourning, another detail from the underground chamber disturbed investigators deeply. One section of Rachel's wall writings repeated a phrase dozens of times across different years. He still visits the lake. Detectives initially assumed the references involved Adrian Vale. But surveillance records proved the old psychiatrist remained under close observation throughout the years Rachel wrote the messages. which meant someone else connected to Camp Mercer continued returning secretly to the Singing Stones, long after the retreat closed. Then forensic analysts examining Rachel's recovered photographs identified a face appearing repeatedly in the background across multiple images taken years apart near the lake. Blurred, watching from a distance, male, middle-aged, smoking. Investigators enhanced the images carefully until the truth emerged. The man was not Adrian Vale. It was Samuel Pike, Daniel Rayner's old accomplice, officially presumed dead in the 2002 cabin fire. The room inside Task Force headquarters reportedly went silent once again because after months uncovering graves, tunnels, hidden children, and surviving victims, investigators now faced another horrifying possibility. Samuel Pike never died either. And according to Rachel's writings, he spent years stalking the shoreline after Camp Mercer burned. Then a final detail surfaced from Canadian police archives that made the situation even worse. 3 months earlier, shortly before the Blackridge investigation reopened publicly, an unidentified elderly man matching Pike's description purchased cigarettes and fuel at a station less than 5 miles from the Singing Stones. The clerk remembered him clearly because he asked one strange question before leaving. Has anyone been digging near the lake? The realization that Samuel Pike might still be alive hit the Blackridge Task Force like a second nightmare unfolding inside the first because Pike was never supposed to matter this much. For decades, he existed only as background noise in old reports. Daniel Rayner's drinking companion, hunting partner, occasional mechanic. A frightened man destroyed by alcohol and paranoia before allegedly dying in a cabin fire 20 years earlier. But Rachel Devereaux's writings changed everything. If Pike survived, then one of the last living witnesses to the full scope of Adrian Vale's crimes remained free somewhere beyond the frozen forests surrounding Camp Mercer. Worse still, he may have spent years returning secretly to the Singing Stones after Rachel escaped there.